Retraining of Racehorses is British horse racing's official charity for the welfare of racehorses who have retired from racing. These wonderful animals can put their intelligent minds to so many different pursuits. These are just some of them.
To watch her riding there, which we'll come to in a moment. Okay, so yes, I was I was listening to what you said, Cara, as well as reading. I'm going to carry on reading all these messages.
I know, that's really quite interesting.
They're just fantastic. Lowestoft. Yes, developing the gait. So now let's concentrate a bit here, or let me concentrate. What do we mean by this? Well, actually, what we're talking about is developing range of movement. So without getting, I'm going to get a bit technical tonight because I think, looking at all you guys here, we've got Warwickshire, Lincolnshire, they're very intelligent counties. So I am going to get, in Northern Ireland, I am going to get a bit technical here. So range of movement. Protraction is when the phase, when a horse with his front leg or hind leg is moving forward. And what was really interesting in those videos is how the poles increased that, especially the protraction phase, and also what is called the aerial phase, or dressage people might respond to that as the suspension phase, which obviously increased it. And I think that there was some great work going on there from both horses. In the first one we saw Steph, didn't we? Yeah. And Steph I know because she, of course, works for Penny and Barry Hills, doesn't she?
She does, yeah. Yeah.
And to invite me there. I'm waiting for your invitation, Steph, because I want to see Penny Hills. Okay, so I think it did a really good job. Actually, Cara, I thought that, the exercises you did were actually very difficult. And it was interesting to see, that, especially the canter exercises through the corner. The first time took the horse a little bit by surprise, and then he got better and better at it. And that's actually fine. I mean, this is partly about what they call proprioception, being aware of where the limb is in space, in the air, and this is what we want to do with the horses.
Yeah, those canter exercises, actually, I could have put more in. I left that one intentionally because he didn't deal with it the first time very well. But for me, it's really important that I don't hold his hand too much through those exercises. He needs to work out his proprioception, his foot placement. And the most important thing for me is that he learns from it. So for me, you could see the first one, He got his legs out of the way. He's a very quick thinking, sharp horse, but the second and third, it got better and better. So his learning development through doing that, that for me, that was progress. I was pleased with that. I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for that progress in him. So just a little bit of background about that horse. He is 18 now. He is retired from competing at Prix St George. He was never a record breaker at it, but he always gave me 110%. He has, interestingly, he has close vertebrae in his spine. And I only say that because it's something that people are really scared of. And you don't need to be with good management. And it's another reason I work him over poles and have done through his career. He now is a schoolmaster. He has a lovely life doing what he wants to do, hacking and doing fun things like this, but he's not competing at the moment. So he's an older horse. And yes, I think they were quite difficult. I mean, that was a lot of raised trot poles for him. And
Cara, just on that, I just want to get to one thing, but first to reply to Helen Forth, yes, I'll definitely come give you a lesson in Yorkshire when I go to the cottage. Cara, you're apparently only 21, so how on earth did you train here for 40 years? Don't know the answer to that. Now, this is very interesting from Cressida that, you know, not especially horses coming out of training, not all of them cope that well with pole work initially. And I think that's a very good point because they were quite difficult exercises. So do you want to talk, Cara, about how to start progressively, you know, before you get to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I would also say about that horse that I was riding, he has evented to intermediate. So he is a very experienced horse. I will start with the basics, and I will start with one pole on the ground, and I will make sure a horse is happy walking back and forth in walk over one pole. I don't use 2 poles. I'll go from 1 to 3 poles, and I'll put them as walk poles first. Or sometimes I'll put them as trot pole setting out, and I'll let them walk through it. Again, I'm not looking for perfect. I don't want to make everything perfect, and the horse needs to work out its foot placement, especially at walk. So once we're happy back and forth over 3 poles, we then might put 5 poles, but it's slowly, the horse will guide me. I won't push the horse out of its, okay, I'll push it out of its comfort zone when I feel it's ready to, and it's offering me that confidence. I won't push it out to the point where we overface them. And that's really important.
Guys, I'm going to butt in a little bit here just because the comments have popped up again now. So I'm fully back online with that. So good news. What I think would be a good idea here would be to actually play the 4th video again and actually have you two talking while it's happening. I think that would probably work quite well.
Okay. So here, I just started him off and he dropped behind my contact, so he's a little bit deep there, but fine. I just moved the trot forwards a little bit, and here I should use my upper body a little bit more to come back to set him up.
Okay, now, and there you could see the difference in the action, particularly of his front legs. One thing I would like to say here, Cara, I very much like the position of this horse's neck. And especially now, as we go on to the canter work, horses jump with elongated, stretched out necks. So for those dressage aficionados amongst you who are a bit obsessed with, quote, keeping them round, forget all that. The horses have got to jump in if you're going to progress, if this is a progression towards jumping, where this horse's neck is exactly right. They don't need to be deeper or rounder. We can talk more about that.
Oh, sorry, yeah, this is his second time over the poles. You saw he was a little bit short to the first one. He's really up for it. He's up for everything, this horse. So I do lots of transitions. So yes, I put a walk transition in, and then I ask him to go again. He's super confident. he thinks he knows best. So actually he can just...
Sorry to butt in, but I'm going to. We might have missed it. Let's have a look at it. Well, we might see this one's cancer again. Yeah. So his hind leg action is really good. Look at how he takes the right hind, well, bit of a difficult moment there, but look now how he takes the right hind leg forward. What we want to see with him, the video just come to an end, but his front leg range of movement could come a little bit higher and reach forward in that protraction phase I was talking about. And obviously how to get the forward reach is through exercises like Cara was just showing you, but also, and I think we'll probably come on to talk about with some of the questions, the horse needs to recruit, engage the sling, what they call the sling muscles underneath the pecs, underneath near the sternum, in order to, if they use those muscles, they lift up the leg as it comes forward, and we'll talk about that. But a lot of thoroughbreds and race horses are can appear to move croup high, and people get a bit hung up on this, especially dressage community. Mostly what the croup high element is actually just a differential between the height of the sacrum, where the pelvis is, or what we call the croup, or and the withers. And the withers are, all the withers are just spinous processes. So if horses have slightly shorter spinous processes and slightly longer hind limbs, there's obviously going to be that differential. But you'll be amazed how a horse, if you get these sling muscles that I'm talking about, and of course the other muscles underneath the tummy, the abdominal muscles, if you get them tightening, how those withers come upwards in motion. They may not when the horse is standing still, but they will dynamically. And actually your horse, Cara, I could see a variation in that. So you know, as a goal, if you were trying to work on his canter, that would be one thing with that horse that you would work on. But what I'm trying to say is, just because you look at a horse standing still and he looks croup high compared to with withers, don't think, oh, this is a disaster, he's never going to come up in the forehand. He absolutely can. Lots of horses can. Lots of absolutely top dressage horses have been like that. Perhaps lots is an example, is an exaggeration, but some.
We're going to come to questions. Sorry, Cara. We're going to come to the questions at the end, but just two questions, just because I'm just aware we've got to just keep the time going as well and just fit everything in. Just two questions that have come in as well, which might just help with the chat. Do you start on poles on a straight line, and do you work on the lunge with the poles? So Richard or Cara, really, for that one?
I'll go first. I do start in a straight line. I like to keep things simple. I do also progress to using them on a turn, but yes, I keep it simple, keep it easy. So and I do one pole and then 3 poles, and the reason I don't do 2 poles is that I think personally it can encourage the horse to jump both poles. So yes, straight line, nice, and straightness really important. Center of the pole, one way, back and forth. That's a good way to start. And lunging, do I lunge over poles? Actually, I haven't for a long time. I used to. I think in my mind, I'm probably become a bit too much of a control freak, want to be on their back to do poles. I lunge all my horses once a week. I like to just see them from the ground, really, would be probably the reason I do it. I like to do my pole work ridden. I'm not offended by lunging over poles. I just like to be on their backs. Yeah.
A quick one to that before I do. I mean, I'm just obsessed now with this chat. So hello to everybody, especially Fiona from Rutland. I haven't seen you for a long time. Question of the poles, how to start. We have poles here all the time because obviously with jumpers, there are always poles on the ground. Even if that's a pole just lying by a fence, not placed to go over, we will walk over it. We do a lot of walk, and actually in probably the last, I don't know, 10 years, we do a lot of work in hand, what people would call ground work in hand, with the horse in hand, especially young horses. And we find that pre-education, helping them to, what people call park, stand still, because we have a lot of horses with a high level of flight instinct. And if I'm glancing down the huge number of messages here, there's quite a few who are saying, horses rush over the poles. And obviously with the ex-race horses, it's not surprising, but it's not actually that surprising. Horses rush, even if they haven't been racing, the way often people start them, and I suppose I'm also guilty of this in years gone by, that is what we train them to do. And we now absolutely do not want that to happen. Our jumping horses need to be very careful how they land over one fence, to be in a very neutral speed mode, if you like, so not rushing forward, because the distances then are completely mucked up in the show jumping. So how this starts is the introduction or reintroduction of the horse to the pole. It will have its learned memory of, there's a pole, it reflects a jump, this is what I do. I run at that and run over it. But you can also wire, you can't ever get rid of that, but you can wire in new habits. And I am going to keep delving into technicalities for those science people around you. You can start new neural pathways, and that is what all training aims to do, and not just start them, but deepen that pathway by repetition. So yes, we would walk a horse, lead a horse over a pole, stop, stand. I don't mind positive reinforcement, give it a nut or a treat or whatever, stand, have a chat, let it completely relax. That kind of thing. So it's a very informal way, and then you can progress on from there. But even on their backs, we'd walk over the pole, stop, give it a loose rein, walk across the pole, a diagonal. I don't think you have to have a really formal over control. When you're trying to get horses' attitudes chilled towards something, it helps if you are too. And I think sometimes to take a less formal approach with these horses that you're trying to start a new habit will help. But we can, I'm getting a feeling, Mark, that you want to go on, but probably this will come out a lot when as I talk through some of the advice and what I've learned about training horses. Everything, every part of their movement, whatever you're trying to do, the desired things we want to do and the things we don't want them to do, it is all starts from the horse's brain. So whatever the brain is telling the horse to do, so what's going on in the brain are pre-learned habits, and that's why horses do things. When they're not pre-learned, they will randomly experiment. But so what we've got to do is help them learn habits. So we don't race our horses round on the lunge anymore. When the young horses are starting to be backed, we probably spend 20 minutes, half an hour just walking, not trotting and cantering like we used to do 20 years ago to get them used to the saddle or get the freshness out of it. No, we walk because we want horses to not come into a school and fire off the chemicals that triggers them to, oh, this is the place where we gallop around for the first 20 minutes. No, we want them to come in and this is the place they walk around and maybe stop and fall asleep and start again. And I think that's the way I would apply that with retraining any horse that has a pre-learned, a different system. I would just start with that. And
interestingly, I'm just going to, sorry, Mark. I'm just going
to say, sorry, carry on.
This is such good learning for me as well. I'm very, lucky to have Richard here. That I think where I was coming from, the lunging or the groundwork was, I don't want them rushing. So on a lunge, I don't want them speeding up and not having that control of them rushing through it. And that is one absolute golden nugget I took from when I was based with Richard, was when you lunge a horse, it goes out at walk and it walks, and it's not, I'm not lunging for freshness. I'm lunging to mentally relax it before we take the next step of going on. And that's something I really impress to people. And that's a Davison nugget that I think is so important. And so a lot of people will set the horse out of the lunge and say, well, just let them get all of that energy out. And before you know it, you've got an out of control situation and a horse with its tail over its back. So that walking is a really brilliant bit of advice.
And there's a very interesting one here from Laura, who says that her horse hates poles. He eventually goes over them, but with a lot of encouragement. I love these comments where people say, my horse, there's another one, my horse loves jumping. It's really interesting that we know the horses love things or hate things, or are maybe a bit nervous about doing something instead of hating them. So we don't really know the emotions that go on in horses. We can guess. But anyway, going back to Linda's point about hates horses, but I mean, I wouldn't, I can think not that long ago, a few years back, I'm not going to mention any names, but we had an Olympic jumper here with a really successful Grand Prix jumper. In fact, this horse had won the Aachen Grand Prix, which is like, you know, you don't get any better than that. And we were working on its dressage, and I said, oh, well, let's just try some poles. And this horse, like Laura, your horse, this jumper absolutely could not get how to trot over a pole. It could canter over poles, and the more we tried to get it to trot over the pole, it, you know, and I thought, actually, hang on, we only tried to do this to see if this could help. I can't even remember what the issue was, but all it actually did was get the horse in a complete state, didn't achieve anything, didn't add anything to it, and we said, okay, well, let's forget that, let's find a different way. So I think if it's getting horses stressed and it's not going to achieve anything, yeah, don't do it. I mean, ultimately, the use of poles, now I'm jumping forward even with our jumpers, I'm not one of those people who throws poles down on the ground. I'm not talking about to help rider learning, I'm talking about to help horse learning, to throw poles in between fences to regulate this and do this. I prefer to try and do it through the influence of the rider, through the reins and the legs, basically. Because if we can achieve it with that, then we're not going to have that when we go to a show. We're not going to have poles on the ground and all the rest of it. And I think you can get a bit reliant, and almost with poles, they become an end in themselves. And likewise with dressage, with your horse, looking at your horse, Cara, and Steph's horse there, I'd like them to be able to move their legs and that range of movement without poles, triggered by, could either be an audible, a voice click, or it could be a pressure with your leg or with the spur. I did say the spur, we'll be talking about that later, to recruit the muscle, well, first of all, to go to its brain, then to go to back down to those group of muscles and try to achieve that. So that's what I want to do. I want to be able to influence a horse to do all these things without poles, because, you know, it's much easier. But just before we finish with Laura's horse, some horses, very careful horses, we have one here actually, a 4-year-old, ultra careful horses that hate touching poles and hate the noise of a pole. You are sometimes better off to use foam poles, which are actually a bit safer anyway, but the horses are probably less sensitive to those. So yeah, I think you can just take the whole thing in the round and not get over bogged down with it.
Great advice. Brilliant chat, guys. Thank you for that. The next video, we're going to really skip, I think, maybe a few stages here, but then we're going to come back and look at sort of stretching and relaxation, which I think would work really well to fit to Richard's point, which he's spoken a lot to there. So the next video, and I think it would be helpful if Cara and Richard talk maybe during this video. Now we've realized we can hear you. And this one is skipping ahead to something that people may not be looking at doing just yet. It's canter, canter, and changes.
Okay, so firstly, my transition wasn't direct enough to the canter. I love using counter canter. I feel it's a useful suppling exercise for this horse.
I wonder if we're going to see this again. I really liked the way you use your left leg in right lead canter. Okay, we're in counter canter here. Watch that left leg. It's a little bit what we call back, behind the girth, which is right, because okay, that was very good. The first change is very noticeable. How you, Mark, I don't know, let's just wait and see, where we go. But I'd like to replay this, because now there's the left leg. That was a very good aid. It wasn't coming too far back. Most people take a change aid leg way too far back. And actually, I know somebody, could we just play that again?
Yeah.
So the second change he did was his change, not my change.
Right, let's look at that left leg. You can see where it is. Think about where your leg is. Give the ribs a number. It doesn't matter. Now watch that left leg. It's just having a little tickle. That's the left hind leg. There you go. And then it relaxes. And then obviously Cara with the right leg gave the signal and the horse changed it through. You need to think about a trailing hind leg. So now the left hind leg is the trailing hind leg. So that's the one that's got to jump through. So we have to have a little conversation, watch the left spurt, and then it comes through. So people are far too focused on what I call the trigger aid. If she does another one, the trigger aid will be the left leg. There it is. They're too focused on that. And before that, you need to use the leg on the outside, the hind leg that is furthest back. And you need to have a little conversation, and you need to read. So now the trailing leg, hind leg is the left. Watch your left leg. It's having a chat. I don't know when this is going to happen, but watch that. Okay, the heel is up, but watch it. It's having a conversation. She's feeling, getting feedback. Is the change in the horse's brain? Is he thinking, I'm going to have to change my hind legs? If it isn't, then what will happen? The flight instinct will take over. The horse will lift its neck and its front legs will run off. Left leg, left leg, left leg. Let's watch then now the horse comes through. So changes, this is all about hind legs. Think about having the conversation, read back, there you go. And don't think about suddenly taking a leg back, shocking the horse. I mean, you know, if somebody comes up behind you and pokes you in the side, you jump up. That's an instinct. And that's what I'm afraid it's all too easy to do with our legs. We think we're giving the aid for a change. There is no aid for a change. It's first of all, a learned movement that we have to get the horse to discover how to do it. And then whichever is the stimulus or the trigger to get it to do it that way, we may say, okay, well, actually, the trigger that we're having to use at the moment for a few clicks or whatever it is, that isn't going to work for me in the long term to have that as the eventual stimulus. So I've got to change over from that stimulus to what I want to do, which mostly we want to give these signals with the legs. But when people talk about preparation, we're not talking about preparing the rider. So it's not a question of I'm ready, take my leg back. It's not that. Is the horse's brain, can you feel it's going to the hind legs and he's thinking, how do I get rid of that left leg that we saw Cara using? How do I know, I might just bring my left leg forward. And if the horse brings the left hind leg forward, normally it brings the left full leg forward. Not always, but mostly. And if that's why a horse does it, then that's what it's all about. So I'm afraid the simplistic thing about, oh, come across the diagonal and take your leg back will work on old trained, I won't say schoolmasters, or horses that have learned that and don't have a high flight instinct. But all these thoroughbreds and racehorses, in the main, not always, have slightly elevated flight instincts, and you do not want to be the same with all top sport horses, by the way, and you don't want to be triggering the flight instinct. Neck up, front legs going fast, obviously all legs going fast is the big issue, but Anyway, I hope I've explained that. So I thought you did very good execution, Cara, of that preparation leg in the change. I hope I'm not making it too complicated for you, but
no, you're not, Richard. But I think what's a good thing for both of you actually to answer would be, which would also generally pick up a few of the comments that we've had. Let's take it back to actually teaching or building up to teaching our ex-racehorse a flying change. How would you start? Are you starting in counter-canter? Are you introducing a pole on the diagonal? What are the stages for a horse that you've probably never asked to do a flying change before? It's a little bit sharp. Many of our people in our chat, I think, will be in this situation. There's bucking and all sorts coming when they're asking for them. How would you start? Cara, do you want to go first?
I'll give it a go. Okay, so firstly, there are many roads to Rome. So there are different ways of educating a horse to change from a left to right or right to left. On this particular horse, I really, it worked for him to change from counter-canter. I wanted to give him a clear vision of where it was easier for his foot placement to be. So it was easier for his balance and his foot placement to go from counter-canter into true canter. So that's probably not very well put, Richard, but before the steps before that, did I have movement within my canter? Could I move him on and back? Could I do a walk to canter on a straight line, canter, walk, canter? Yes, okay, all of those boxes are ticked. Did I have a counter canter? Yes, I did have a counter canter. Could I energize him to the point where he found it more comfortable to put his legs in a different lead canter? And that's how my steps went through that route with that horse. I have also taught them from a leg yield going back to the track. Essentially, I'm trying to get their brain to think about where would be the easier place for them to be with their body. So they have got a channel of where that's the easier route. There's always a pathway that they can find that the easier route to step through to. Richard can probably put that in a more educated terminology for me.
No, I'm actually, I'm still getting a bit obsessed with everybody's questions here. Mine just fly bucks. Laura, this is all completely normal. Are simple changes a good exercise? Yes, they are. So basically what the first concept to get through to a horse is that we want to literally get its attempt at changing from one canter to another, and you will find it will have that attempt more one way than the other way. So you will need to experiment. So the very first time that we do this, we will come across a diagonal. It's not an accurate diagonal. And we, as an experimentation, an assessment, we will click a little bit, we will do what you saw Cara doing, wriggle that leg, we will have a little experimenting. We will not give an aid. That's my best tip. Do not give a horse an aid because it's completely meaningless. And the sharper and more sudden and more shocking and disturbing a horse is suddenly taking a leg back, you've missed your moment. The horse has taken off, it's stuck its neck up, it's fly bucked, it's done this, that and the other. So there is no aid when you're trying to help a horse find out how to change its legs from one way to the other. So you try sort of each way, and then you get a feeling. Well, we're teaching 5-year-olds to do this right at the moment, and you'll see, okay, well, that way he's actually having a go at it. Of course they're not. Dressage people are terrible with flying changes because they're so judgmental. Oh, the horse is late behind, or it's early behind. Forget that. You don't need to judge it. You just need to think, is this horse trying to change from one canter to another? So that's the first goal. Find which way it does it. When you can get to a certain point to do what Cara was doing from counter-canter, if you've got enough space especially, it's brilliant because while you're waiting for the horse to think, you're going to add slight mental pressure you do not have to have what everybody calls a fantastic canter. And then I say, okay, what is a fantastic canter? You need actually quite a small canter. And you need quite a small canter. This is just how to get a horse to do it the easiest way. And then you're going to do some different sorts of clicks, because a sound is the best stimulus for a horse. It's not going to be the end one, but it's the way to get horses to do things. And then you're going to have a wriggle here and a wriggle there, and you're going to leave it thinking, this is slightly irritating. I wonder if I experiment and change my legs, will it stop the minor irritation? And I'm just trying to put this into words, what you're trying to do, and therein lies the difficulty. But that's what you're trying to get the horse to have a go at doing this with as least big front leg movement as possible. And basically, I'm trying to describe how to have a go at it and get into the counter-counter situation. And you might find that you're giving a horse, you're not coming to a corner where the horse has got to do the change, or you've got to do the change because here comes the corner. You can stay on a big circle and it can take as many strides as it wants. And you're trying to read back, is it trying to find something else? And that's the first goal. And from there on, you just, there's no specific rules. You're guiding and you're funneling. It's quite a difficult question to try to do this, Cara, without horses to show you. But, don't worry when we talk about being late behind, don't worry about it. It's not late behind, it's early in front, and it's completely natural. And as the horse goes on, this is all quite easy things to solve. But as somebody says, of course, the horse will not understand what you want. He will try to put his arse in the air, called bucking or rearing or whatever they do, and whatever labels we put on that. Horses don't know any of this stuff. So it's all a question of experimenting, and for a horse, a process of elimination. So it's got to try 10 things, and which hopefully we don't release the pressure. And this is very difficult, I have to tell you, especially to the lady who wants to know about what to do with the horse rearing, but we'll come to that in a minute. So the basic rules are, when it experiments 9 things that we don't want, we do not release the pressure. When it has a go at a version of the thing that we do want, we minimize pressure. We can actually release complete pressure, or we can certainly minimize it. We need that pattern to build up in the horse's brain for it to think, hang on a minute, that's really funny. Every time I try that, the pressure, the reins, the legs, the click, whatever it is, goes away. And each time I try all these other random things I can try, it doesn't make any difference. That's the cognitive and how horses learn. And that's what, as a horse trainer, I'm an animal trainer, but I'm training a horse's brain, and that's how you get them to do it.
I think actually, Richard, that's a really good point, because we spoke about this in December in one of these webinars. We actually spoke about the pressure release and the whole equitation science. I mean, if people want to go and look at this, this is proven the way horses learn. I mean, I know it's sort of, I suppose, if somebody pushes you, you're going to try different things, you're going to move out the way, and then the pressure's taken off. But actually, this whole equitation science thing there's a lot online about it. People like Andrew McLean have looked into it. There's big symposiums on it. It's proper stuff, isn't it, Richard? It's really backed up. It actually works. There's no sort of debate about it, really.
Look, it's very simple. My living is earned by getting horses to do things. It's as simple as that, whether it's jumping fences or lifting their legs up, which we call fancy stuff of Piaf and all that stuff. But it's influencing horses. I can't make horses lift their legs up. I can influence their brains to send their motor skills and their motor nerves to lift their legs up. So I can't do it. I can get them to do it. But if you understand, you are dealing with the brain, you are dealing with sensory nervous systems, and they are unique. Like your sense of fight or flight. Well, horses don't fight, but flight is different to mine, and we're all different in different environments. So, and we're dealing with this because horses are essentially flight animals, and they're frightened and they're nervous. They do not understand anything. It's all learned, and I do think people go wrong a little bit, because the easiest way to teach people is to say, if you do this, that will happen. It's completely not accurate at all. We can say it might happen. And I'm saying, Cara's giving you advice, and we're saying these are the probabilities. But, you know, once you get and you can figure out what that horse's brain is doing, everybody on here can use their own initiative and think, okay, well, let's just take this pathway to it or that pathway. And there is a different path. And I don't like humanizing horses because we actually don't have that much. I hope we don't have that much in common with horses. My horses, as I tell people, like going out in the field and rolling in mud. And I know some humans do like that. My horses like sniffing each other's bottoms and eating their droppings. And I hope I don't know, you better tell me on your chat, I hope there aren't too many humans that do that. And so
no.
Okay, well, that's great to know that. We didn't really need your confirmation on that, but so it is a danger, because the human brain is obviously evolved differently. That's why we can drive cars and work computers and talk like this. And my horses are in the stables, not on a computer. So it's wrong to apply human attitude to it, and I think it's quite misleading, actually.
Absolutely, and I think it opens up a bit of a traditional thing that happened. We've all seen it in sort of, arenas where somebody's just nag at a horse. Whereas obviously what you've just picked up on there is it's that key moment of actually the release, isn't it, that's important. It's actually taking the pressure, knowing when to apply it and when to take it off.
Yeah, and don't just carry on doing the same thing. The brain is unique, so if you just carry on the same old way and you don't think a bit laterally and think, hang on, how can I, maybe we'll try it like this, then you'll just get the same old responses, and it'll be very difficult for a horse to try to find its way through. Horses are hugely compliant. I don't know when, as I said earlier, whether my horses love it. I have no clue. They don't tell me whether they do or not. I know I could comfort myself by saying that, but all I know is they are incredibly compliant animals. And I know this is a bit weird to say this, but we have sheep here, as Cara knows. I'm going to shut up in a minute, Cara, and let you speak. But so we have.
The photo actually I took is behind you.
Oh, it is.
There they are.
I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Anyway, and my neighbour has a tackle, and I sometimes think when people say, I listen to various things, and they say, oh, the horse is built like this so you can put the saddle on it. That's why its back's like that. And I think, hang on a minute, its back's not like that at all for the saddle. If you see how a horse has evolved over the centuries, that's not it at all. And I sometimes think of beasts of burden, ox or cattle. And I think, well, I wonder what if somebody, way back in the day, instead of said, they did ride oxen, they did use oxen. And if they just said, actually, let's forget this horse lark, let's develop on with the oxen or the camels. I mean, there's another example, they do use camels. But, where would we be there? We wouldn't have these what's the word, basically we imagine the foal drops out of the dressage mare, it's by Vulcan Tants out of whatever, and oh well, if we use our leg here it'll do that or it'll do that. What's happening? It's not working, it's wired wrong. Well, an animal isn't like that, they're animals, and we have to help them with all this learned behavior. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now.
Well, it would be an interesting webinar teaching camels and ox flying changes. Anyway, I'm sure that.
I don't know the oxen, but we have seen.
You should see his sheep training. It's really good.
I think we need to do this. What we'll do as a future webinar, we'll go to Richard's, and when we can all get together again, we'll do a road show, and we'll go and do sheep things.
Actually, there's nothing wrong with the sheep training. It's the sheep dog training that is challenging. It's all challenging. So is I don't want people to think that, oh, it's fine for those professionals. The horses just do exactly what they want. They absolutely don't. But that's the fascination. It's our job to try to get inside their heads, use a bit of lateral thought, and persuade them to discover the thing that we were looking for, and then just minimize pressure. That's the bit. Well, the theory is simple. The practicality is what keeps us interested in it.
Right. Well, I'm going to put a bit of pressure on you both now, because we're going to play the final video. And this one takes things back, I think, you to a better place than me to say this, but I would say this takes it back to the early stages about encouraging the horse to stretch and relax. Cara, over to you.
So hopefully we can put this video on repeat a couple of times. This is a lovely lady that I help with her ex-racehorse, and here we're encouraging it. So a little bit of a background before this video, to stretch down and listen to the half halt and the rider's aids and the seat. This horse was wired to the moon at the beginning of the session. It was on high alert, and it was running. It's a real flight creature, and we just needed it to take a breath and slow down. So one thing I quite like to simplify dressage. So I like to play an opposites game. So if that horse wants to run, then we're going to walk and we're going to relax and we're going to take time. So this horse just wanted to, every time we let go of the rein, it wanted to run. So we used pressure and release, and every time it ran, we slowed it down. We used the seat, increased a little bit more pressure through the contact, said no thank you. And then we encouraged it. The minute the rider felt progression, so not perfection, and not, as you'll see here, we haven't got a perfect stretch. And what is perfect anyway? Let's not get onto that. We released to the horse and showed it a reward by going to the place that we wanted it to. So, for example, this horse had 5 doors open in front of it. We shut 4 of the doors and we opened the one we wanted it to take towards. So progressive, by no means, the ultimate stretch doesn't matter for what we wanted to achieve. This was great that the rider actually at the end of this session, when the horse started very electric, could actually soften and release the pressure, and the horse wasn't running away from her. So that's what that clip was.
Should I, is this the same clip or?
Yeah, it's just the same.
Okay, so very well explained, and this is Linda, isn't it? And I think what a super demonstration Linda's doing. If we could keep playing it, what we're talking about here is neck function. And think about it as function. As you know, the neck vertebrae, where the joints are like an S shape, a bit like a swan's neck. So they're not where the mane is, they go where the reins are, even lower. The vertebrae are down the base of the neck, and then they go sort of up near the right, where the rider's knee is. So those are the joints that we are trying to persuade the horse that if it flexes those joints, closes those joints in different degrees, it will minimize the pressure on the reins. And so that's what you're trying to do with this. Now, I think it's a very good demonstration. You can see it put its head up there, it's up there now. The only there too, what I would say, Linda, because I think you've got a lovely position there, I think your leg control, and if you're going to apply and release pressure, obviously limb control, our arms, our legs, it's essential. You can't immediately minimize pressure with your leg unless you control your leg. So congratulations, it's very good. But now just let's have a look at your upper body. Now it's quite good, but I think there's a little, look at the back of your back, at your lumbar, where your belt is. And to me, it's a bit too wobbly. And why that matters, and why you will eliminate quicker the horse's attempts to put its neck in the, want to say, the wrong place. Can we just look at it once again? In the wrong place, is if your back is a bit less soft, if I use that expression, wobbly, you're using your back. You will use your back not to yield. So if you yield in your tummy and where your back is there, it's a bit over mobile, you see. Actually, that will transfer through your elbows, through the reins to the bit. So what I'm trying to say is that if you have a momentary release in your back function, your own back function, you will be releasing without thinking and without even realizing it. So I think that little bit where it stuck its neck slightly up, I think the horse will do less of. They're there again. So you're doing the reward bit where it experiments going down really good and the horse has worked it out. I think you will reduce the number of attempts it does at the neck function that we don't want if you can just work on controlling your lumbar region yourself and actually being less mobile for this purpose. I mean, obviously there are other times that you want to use that, but if we all agree that it's pressure release how a horse learns, we've also got to think of what we do with our upper bodies, because, you know, we talk about, in the end, we don't want to ride with the influence of our reins or our legs. We want to ride between our hands and legs, and what is between our hands and legs, but it's our upper body. And, you know, this is what all these micro releases of energy of a rider's body are what top riders will say to another top rider. They won't say it in those words, they'll use a shortcut or a slang term, but it's what they notice when from the ground that, oh, you know, there was a bit too much leg or a bit too soft in the body, or a bit too strong in the body, or the rein. And it's that each top rider helps each other with, because that's how you influence horses to have very, very precise control over its neck function. In this case, we're talking about neck function. And just before I finish with that, because I think this is a very good demonstration, bend in the horse, and I'm talking about bend in the neck now. We can go on to talk about what other lateral bend there is in the horse's thorax, the body of the horse, and near its pelvis region, which is not that much, but there is some. But let's just talk about bend in the neck. Bend is, if you want it to be repeatable and to happen when you want it to happen, it's a pressure release. So a lot of people will stand on a loose rein telling me, you know, the thing is, the physio's been coming, you know, every 10 days, and, you know, it is helping, but this horse just can't bend to the left. And literally they can be telling me all this terrible story, and as they're talking, the horse bends its neck and scratches a fly or rubs the rider's boot, and I say, oh, you mean it can't do that? And they're, oh, the horse has bent the neck on its own. And I said, look at it in the field or in the stable. You sure it can't bend its neck? And of course, most horses can. Some horses that have clinical conditions will have difficulty, and slight clinical conditions. I'm not talking about a severe clinical condition, but they are very rare. Most horses, of course, can bend. You wouldn't be able to turn them around in a horse box if they couldn't bend their neck. So what is the issue? The issue is that people make horses bend with a lot of inside leg, or both legs, or the inside rein. And when a horse turns its head to bend, and consequently its neck vertebrae flex or have a kind of lateral flexion, instead of the minimizing of that rein, you know, they're told, now hold the bend, keep the bend, don't let go of the bend, keep it bent to bend. So what is the incentive in the horse? There's no incentive so it doesn't end up in a release of pressure. Then when horses can't find a release of pressure, they just tolerate pressure. Horses are very good at tolerating pressure. The girth is an example. When you put a girth on a 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old, obviously you will not tighten the girth up because it'll just bronk. It's its natural instinct to get rid of this thing. But as it goes on, you know how tight you can do a girth in the end, and it just given up getting rid of the pressure, so it tolerates that. And so what I'm trying to say is, there you saw Cara helping the rider with what we might call a stretching down, but the same applies to a lateral flexion. In fact, the reality is, I've told you about, I've highlighted the S bend, if you like, of the neck vertebrae. The horse's spine doesn't really bend in what we think of a lateral bend. It's all part partly rotational if you look at vertebrae. So it's all a little bit of turning and rotating. And if we understand how difficult it is with those neck vertebrae, and especially the upper neck vertebrae, when you look at them and how they're joined onto the skull, then you'll understand how difficult it is and awkward it is for the horse to find this position that we call, or the dressage judge says, oh, that's a nice bend. Actually, it's a very complex, very nuanced movement, and horses generally can find it easy one way, and they don't find it so easy, just like we wouldn't the other way. Anyway, so there we go.
No, go on, Cara. Go, Cara.
All I was going to say, just actually not on the bend, on the stretch, is what it can be a real common misconception and idealistic to think that you're going to enable your horse to stretch at the beginning of a session. Your physio might say, or your trainer will, we really want it to start long and low and stretching. The reality is that I feel that some horses that maybe have a little bit more of a flight instinct, or can be a little bit more on their toes or alert to surroundings, I don't achieve this stretch until halfway through the session, maybe at the end of the session. We will have rest periods for the horse, but I wouldn't be, and this grey horse, there was no way we could have done that at the beginning of the session on that day. It's not a horse that's in my training all the time. And that was a really great result for that session. But I know that people can sometimes get quite caught up with, I can't achieve that stretch at the beginning, and just that's okay. But Richard might say something else as well on that.
Well, I think most horses, as I said, can stretch. They don't need to be taught to stretch. Obviously, they may, with a rider on their back, have more inclination to dip their backs, and if they dip their backs because of the saddle and or the rider, and I'm talking about it's prior learned behavior. I call everything behavior. So a piaf's behavior, a flying chain's a behavior, a nap, a rear's a behavior. It's all behaviors, because it's all motor behavior. It all comes from the brain through the motor nervous system to its legs. And so I think most horses can stretch, but they don't always carry the memory. So for instance, if their memory, I talked about the neural pathway, if that's like walking across your lawn. If you walk across your lawn in exactly the same footsteps every day, you will make a track. My sheep make sheep tracks because they go in the same little area. Completely no logic. They mess my paddocks, but they do. They make a sheep track. That's the pathway. You're treading down that, and you make it. And the deeper it is, then the more likely it is for that to be repeatable. So if that horse has learned before you got it out of training or anywhere else, it doesn't have to come out of training to learn this, but the pressure on the reins or the pressure of the saddle, the weight on the back is going to make it do that. It will do it, not because there's something wrong with it, but that's just because of the behavior it's learned. So how do we then develop the new habit? And I think a lot of walking and halting at the beginning can teach a horse, remind a horse, because we're talking about memory recall here, that you remember what we did yesterday, maybe got it just at the end, or like with that session now with Cara, it moved its neck into a certain function, and it thought, that's better. They don't always get it immediately that it's much nicer. So, horses have to do it a number of times for the light bulb to come up, because as I said, they can tolerate a lot of pressure. So you want the light bulb to come up. Now you'll get that light bulb happening more often, the shorter, because it boils down to memory retrieval, the shorter the intervals in between. So when people say, oh, I've brought him out, 3 times a day or twice a day for 20 minutes, the reason that works is there's only 4 hours in between, as opposed to 24 hours. And there is more likely, any test of memory is, if the interval is shorter, it works. So that's what we're talking about in terms of response to the reins. And if you help the horse, I think a lot of people are warming up in not the best way. I say, are you warming up its physiological systems, its cardiovascular systems, and are you warming up its neurons, its memory? Or are you only warming up its cardiovascular and letting its neurons, its memory, go down a path that actually in 20 minutes time, when you say, that's right, we're ready for work now, you've actually got to be going, oh no, okay, we've been going the wrong way for memory, and now we've got to start. So I think it's quite possible to do both. You just need to spend enough time in walk. Obviously, everybody talks about transitions. Transitions are pressure release. When you want to stop, you use your reins. When you want to go, you use your legs. And so they're pressure release. That's what they are, opportunities. And the horse will very quickly remember, oh yeah, okay, then I describe it how you want to describe it, but I give, I flex my neck. If I do that, I feel more comfortable with the reins. And that's how it works. So don't walk and trot around upside down to just warm up, because as I said, that's confusing, or it's less likely to achieve what you want to achieve. Oh, somebody's just asked, what would you recommend for a good warm-up? That, exactly. In fact, a lot of people, even top level, it's got better now. I mean, I'm talking about even Olympic level, don't get their heads around, in terms of the physiological systems we're trying to warm up. If the climate is warm and it's boiling hot, you'll see the veins of the horse on the neck are already standing out. It's a cooling system. So you don't need, it's not the same as when it's freezing cold, then you do need to move around, and you do need to get the blood that is not on the superficial muscles, because it's all cold, it's all inside. You do need to get it. So you need to warm up differently in cold weather than in hot weather. You know, from that physiological point of view, what I'm trying to say is, parallel to that, make a judgment on what is the horse trying, what am I trying to help this horse learn and memorize? So for horses that are very easy to respond to pressure release from the reins, don't worry about it. You can trot around with its, you know, neck stuck out. That's absolutely fine, because, you know, when you start with that, its recall of memory and pressure release will be fine. But the ones that are in that transitionary stage, that you're trying to start a new habit, then I suggest stick more rugs on the horse while in the early part, and still do walk, hold, walk, hold, walk, hold to remind it.
Great. So, and actually, just going back a little bit to what you were just saying there, Richard, about and both of you were saying about the stretching. I mean, when I'm sat in commentary boxes on this, watching it, you two again are the experts here, but when we're sort of looking from a commentary perspective, our view, I suppose, is that this movement, even though it seems and it sounds very basic, free walk on a long rein, actually, I mean, you can sit in top end competitions and watch. These top horses are still struggling in parts with that basic movement, aren't they, Richard? Oh, it's not. It's certainly not an easy movement.
That will not. All horses can stretch. I mean, as I said, unless there's something wrong with them, put them in a field or put the feet on the floor, and you'll see they can stretch, no problem. So that isn't a problem. In that situation that you're describing, Mark, it's because of two things: environmental issues. You know, the flags are flapping, it's on its own, the horse is in the horse box over there shrieking for it. So it's those outside things, because the flight instinct of a horse is not to put its head down. The flight instinct of a horse is to lift its head up, look and see where the danger's coming, and that's how it runs. So that's why they do it. The other reason the Grand Prix horses often do it is because of a changeover in muscle usage. So for instance, in the Grand Prix, you have to do passage, and then you have to go into an extended walk. And the musculature required to achieve the biomechanics and the airtime, the aerial phase of a passage is almost completely in conflict with how it has to work and function for a good extended walk, and that decontraction, you know, of the top line muscles. And so it takes some horses a few steps to sort of adjust, or if it's excited or nervous or of something, it might not do it. But those, you have to differentiate between those environmental or biomechanical changes to other
And I think as well, anybody that watches that, proving that point completely, anybody that watches eventing dressage will see that movement's the one where these horses fit to run for their lives at badminton, whatever level. And they just get very hot and they tighten up, don't they? But it's a shame, because actually that movement in many tests is worth double.
Well, it is. I mean, but believe me, it's more than a shame. You know, when you're sitting on the thing and it's, you know, rather nervous, it's like, you know, and you've driven, you know, 2 days, or your groom has, you know, across Europe. It's more than a shame, I can tell you. But it happens. It's a horse, and it's its brain, and it's its brain telling its body what to do. And I know there's questions coming up on spooking, and, you know, it's spooking is not stupidity. It's, if I was a horse, I would spook like mad, and that's actually not true, but I'd like to think that, because if you are an alert and a survivor, then you're out looking out for your horse, you're looking out for danger. That is one of the things, funnily enough, that is hardwired into horses. I've said it, nearly everything we do with them is learned behavior, but the hardwired survival thing. And so I often think, you know, that horse that doesn't spook in the wild, he'd be the one that just moves it down that canyon and the lion would jump off the rock and eat him. Whereas the one that'd be like, I'm not sure about that, you know, you go first, he'll stay alive. So although spooking is frustrating for us, it's part of a horse, and it's part of a horse's natural instinct. And actually, just before I leave this flight instinct bit, it is actually that makes good sport horses. When I started doing dressage, they were absolutely ghastly. They were, you know, they weren't responsive to the leg. They were stiff as a board. They weren't what we would call athletic sport horses. They were lumps. They're very good, calm characters. They never jogged in the extended walk, for sure. They'd do that all day long, but they wouldn't do a piaffe or, you know, an extended trot. These days, you've got that breeding, actually, that has worked on the flight instinct. And it's a bit of a problem, to be honest, because it works for top sport horses with people that have facilities and the skill and everything to manage them. And likewise, when I see racehorses, when we're watching the racing, you know, they must have that flight instinct and herd instinct, because if they haven't, they're the ones that are going to be, you know, walking around the back when the others are disappearing, you know, down the first furlong. And so, yeah, so the flight instinct is what we have to manage and channel.
Well, I would actually definitely say that some of those pure dressage horses, I mean, some of the trot-ups that I've been stood at Hartpury, actually, when you've been competing, some of those horses on the trot-up are really full of it, and they're about 18 hands and jumping in all directions.
Yeah, well, they're actually only about 16 too, but they're so excited with those trot-ups.
They rise.
18 hands or 20 hands high, and that's a very good example. And that is the, you know, and it's cumulative, of course. This is the difficulty, you know, it's cumulative, that they associate. Horses learn by association, you know, that you know that when you rattle the feed buckets, when you're mixing up the feed and they hear that noise, they know what comes after the noise is the food. So that's why they kick the doors and whinny and all the rest of it, because they know that. And exactly the same with trot ups. And this is why some of us who, you know, getting older, don't actually want the thing around our ears. So we try to do it calmly. But that's easier said than done, I might say.
It definitely is, and I don't believe you that they're 16 too, because I've hidden behind ground jury members while a huge thing is, you know, and Jenny Lauriston Clark, it is at Hartpury shouting at everybody. But anyway, right, yeah. Let's move on. Thank you both for that. I think we've only got about 10 minutes left, so we're going to have to rattle through these questions. I'll read them out, then I'll come for sort of fairly brief answers if you can, guys, but I'll come to each of you for them. So the first one was sent in by Sarah, and Sarah says, my former racehorse has a noise reaction issue. He's great with most things now, but I struggle with loud tractors, lorries and traffic. Most of the time he's okay, he's just not completely confident. He's also reactive in the school when they canter, and this has come up in the chat as well by the looks of it. Warm-up arenas, other people cantering past, and it sends you off into oblivion. Cara, do you want it first? Briefly, if you can.
Yeah, so I will give it a go again, but I know the expert with this, as with everything actually, is Richard. So I would try and manage the situation at home, and that's not always possible. But if you can develop noise, don't try and ignore the problem. Try and tackle it in a controlled way that you can control the other horse that's in the arena perhaps with you. I would have no problem with using soundproof ears just to, again, slightly dull the senses down of the horse, and then build the horse's confidence, perhaps using some positive reinforcement when the noise occurs. I think, Richard, maybe the clapping and positive, that you are number one at that.
From Sarah, isn't it? I feel for you, because these horses find me, and I don't know what I've done wrong, but any horse that, you know, is incredibly noise sensitive seems to find me. I would really like one that wasn't. Bubbling is incredibly sensitive to noise. So I agree with Cara. In the short term, well, I said I wasn't going to get very technical. You've got to keep the neurotransmitters down. So that's the adrenaline, especially when adrenaline gets created in the system, it's created. Now, obviously, there's different levels of it, I'm sure, and cortisol. And cortisol is very important. It gets a bad press, but cortisol is what gets your teenage son out of bed in the morning. So don't knock cortisol. We need it. We need it for alertness and working things out. But when there's too much of that in the system, then they are very alert to, in your case, Sarah, noise, but it can be other stimuluses as well. So yes, so in short term, not only stick ear soundproof fly hoods, you know, but with the soundproof, but put in the ear plugs as well. They're sometimes with some horses a bit tricky to get in. This is a home I'm talking about, and drip feed the noise in. You have to find out what it is. It's sometimes not continuous noise. Obviously, I have the radio on. It's sometimes silence and then the smallest sort of noise. It's bizarre. It's not the biggest noise. It can be the smallest noise, but you can habituate. We're talking about habituation here, and that means exposing the horse to a small amount of the trigger, the stimulus that gets this reaction. And as I said, it's a neurotransmitter, a chemical that goes in a horse. But you can habituate it to, in the end, they're not so responsive to it. So that's what I do. I go with you on that one. But just understand habituation, and then you can work that one out.
And again, I can vouch for bubbling, because it's usually commentators, people like me, which we pipe up at just the right moment, don't we, Richard, and send you into...
Yeah, and you get that crowd to clap just at the wrong moment. But that's what it is, and that's I enjoy that. That's why I take bubbling to these very big competitions. I don't avoid them. I know that he's got to get over that, and we have to deal with it. And funnily enough, just before we leave, I know you're in a hurry, but Anki van Grunsel always had a problem with Salinero at the end, and they used to think it was something to do with the hold. It wasn't the hold. That obviously, Anki was, #1 rider in the world. When she finished a test in huge indoor shows, it was like a battery of machine guns going off with the applause. That horse, that's all it ever got. So that's what it was expecting. It was predicting. So obviously its flight instinct was it moved its legs. Well, she was maybe halting, but it moved its legs. And so if you notice with quite a few of the horses that I've started in the last 10 years or so, I give my horse a sugar lump or a treat or whatever. Terrible sugar, not wouldn't sugar. At the end of a test, and I'm not doing it for isn't it lovely giving your horse for reward for doing all the PF massage. I'm not doing that at all. It tells me if that horse is tempted to eat the sugar, then when they have a high level of adrenaline, they don't eat. So it's an indication to me. And while you start off, you might give that sugar and with all the noise and everything like that. But after you've done it 3 or 4 times, it's half and half. Oh, shall I sugar on my friend? And in the end, Artemis used to stop there and turn his head around waiting for the sugar, but his legs would be still. And that was my strategy for dealing with that. We know why that noise arrives. It's just people and commentators trying to actually show their appreciation. But a horse, you know, the horse doesn't understand what the hell's going on. Right. Sorry, long answer, but again, it's all
but no, it's
building up.
These answers are brilliant, absolutely. From one extreme to the other, we've spoken mostly in this webinar about sharp horses and trying to sort of calm everything down. There is obviously an opposite end to this on the scale, and the horses which are lazy, behind the leg, and Rebecca, Emma, Jackie, all bringing questions pretty much around this topic. One of them has a 3-year-old. She's been doing groundwork, but she's finding him quite lazy and unresponsive. Another is lazy and is more nappy. All of these huge problems, probably just as much of a problem in the sort of general day-to-day as the sharp horse. So Richard, what do you do when the horse just doesn't respond?
Oh,
Want me to go first?
Well, I was going Richard first and Cara, but you can go in either.
I won't get a word in edgeways if he goes first.
No,
go on then, Cara.
Okay, fine. And then you see, you can correct me. Right. So firstly, this is really common with ex-race horses. People will say that they drop behind the leg, they can be lazy, and the real stigma is they're sharp, hop, fizzy. I come across these all the time. So let's call it lazy. I don't think it is lazy in my opinion. What I want is that the horse to understand what the rider is asking. So if 10 times that the rider, well, it doesn't matter, we could pinch its left ear, but let's just say puts the leg on, and 8 of those times the horse gets one response from the rider, and 2 of those times the horse gets another response, the horse is going to be confused as to what the rider really wants. So for me, if you have a lazier horse, you're going to want to be very clear with your aids. So actually nagging is the worst thing that you can do. They'll want that they will be tolerant of it. You'll kick. The horse doesn't know what you're doing. I mean, you might as well be flicking its tail. It doesn't mean anything to that horse. So you have to reinforce, I'm going to say the word aid. You're going to have to reinforce a pressure until the horse takes the right movement towards the step that you want it to take. At that point, I would tell my riders that I coach to take the pressure away. And then they learn through repetition. So we just repeat that. And it might be that we start with a very small pressure, so a little leg aid, and we increase. And again, if we want trot but the horse canters, great, doesn't matter. It's a forward thought that we're looking for until the horse starts to understand, oh, okay, that leg means we go forward. But the key to that is the rider's discipline of their leg control and aid.
Richard.
As they do.
Excellent answer. Far too nice, Cara. Right. I can't help any of you that have got a lazy horse because I don't know what one is. I actually really don't know what a lazy horse is, but I know what an unresponsive horse is, and I know why it's become non-responsive. And actually, Mark, you shocked me because you used 2 different. Well, actually, the people writing the questions, they use 2 different expressions, even in the same question. My horse is lazy, he's not responding. Oh, okay. When people tell me this, again, they're standing in front of me saying, this is the laziest horse, he's brain dead, and a fly lands on its side near where their leg is, and it twitches its muscle or it swishes its tail. And I say, you mean he's that unresponsive, but he's just recognise when a fly lands on his back? He's not lazy, he's just learned to become unresponsive for all the reasons that Cara's just mentioned. So I ask people to think about contact, what we have with reins or against its side with legs, is a form of habituation. We often say, oh, this one's a bit sharp, I can't get my legs on. Or if you're backing a 3-year-old, you say, oh, I don't know. And why? Because if you put your legs on, the 3-year-old will arch its back and buck you off. That's what they do in the wild to get predators off their backs. Completely normal. And with the fresh horse that you can't get your leg on, you work it around, you leg yielding it to, it tolerates the pressure of your leg. When you take that toleration too far, you've got a lovely contact there. Don't blame me if you then say, the horse isn't responding. So you're playing on a knife edge with contact. It is a form of habituation. We do need it, but we only need so much of it. So think about that. Think about those, or how many of you heard, keep your leg on, keep your leg on, and go, you took your leg off. It's just ridiculous. Obviously, if you keep your leg on when the horse is cantering, let's say, if you wanted to canter, then in the end, it's going to think, well, I can't get rid of this pressure. I might as well do something else. So if you go down the route of, I'm going to have to keep my leg on, that is like you're going to have to keep answering your children's 5 times table for them, because they're never going to learn it for themselves. Don't keep your leg on, take your leg off. When the horse does what you don't want it to do, pull your leg on. When it doesn't want what you want to do, remove the pressure. So all of that stuff, and bending around your inside leg and all that, you're going down a path that is actually, I do think that it's a bit of a welfare issue, because horses need to be able to minimize the pressure. So Cara's question was completely right. Only one thing I'll say, and I'm just going to put this out there. These days, I do not use the expression, he's not listening, because most of the time, I'm not talking about an audible click or a whoa or an audible stimulus. We're talking about, he's not listening to your leg. Well, hang on, listening is something they do with their ears. He's not responding to your leg. So if you want the scale of response, for me, number 1 out of 5 is the fly landing. And, number 5 is massively pressure tolerant. And we have to go from massively pressure tolerant to the horse responding with the fly.
Yeah, I think I also got told off there as well for using the words lazy, but that was in the question.
I know it was, yes, but you also use the word response. That's what, like, they're all, and obviously you can tell I'm teasing a bit here, but that is what most people think. But don't think about it as lazy, think about it being unresponsive. And it's our job to help response, not the horse's job.
Well, that's me told, so we'll move on.
One more plea. Please give up it's not in front of the leg. I mean, work that expression out. Unless you're a side saddle rider, most people have 2 legs. So what does it mean? He's just not responding to the leg. But what response do we want? Do we want that leg going forward? Do we want him gaining more ground? Do we want him going up and down? Do we want him going side? There's 4 different responses we want. And sure, he can have a split second or where he fails to respond, but it's not that complicated. Just get it what it is. But leave the confusing, dressage-y, ambiguous terms, and just keep it simple. And it really helps. That's what I find. My students are really annoyed with me because I stop them saying all these things all the time.
Well, I will never say them again. But again, just to clarify, they were on the question. Yeah. So it wasn't completely me. Right, 2 more questions to get through, and I'm really going to have to push you for 30-second answers. I'll give you one of these each.
I can't do 30 seconds.
Well, you're going to have to. Okay. Cara.
Okay, yeah.
First of yours, please. I struggle with my horse in canter on his right rein, especially the first canter. It's very hard to get. Asking him to canter on time is more luck than judgment. We do lots of leg yield as exercise, but no matter what I try, he never gets strong enough on the leg. I've had him 3 years and running out of ideas. Any tips or advice for canter on the right rein?
Okay, was that it's struggling to pick up right lead canter?
Yes. She hasn't put that in here, but I assume that's what she means.
Let's use that.
Probably is the right lead, or it could be a
okay, fine. So some X-rays, so quickly just brush on welfare, just make sure that horse has been vet checked, it's flexed up, it's all good. So assuming all sound and happy and all of that good stuff. Some X-ray horses that come off tracks can be very left or right-handed. Some run better on left or right-handed tracks. If you have a left or right-handed horse that prefers one side or the other, and you're struggling, one of my first things that actually I like to see them on the lunge, and I want to see without the rider if they are able to pick up that lead canter. So that's one thing I will do. If that's a yes, okay, that's great. Again, it comes back to, for me, pressure and release. I want to stimulate that horse into thinking that the easiest path to take is the right lead. So I'm closing all of the doors that could possibly allow it to step through into that left lead. And I'm really encouraging it that easiest route to go through, the channel to go through where there's least pressure, that's most encouraging to get away from the irritation of my leg, my stimulus, my leg, my rein, is to take up that right lead. And then it's repetition. So it keeps feeling that release. Okay, if I step right, it gets that release. But for me, if you've got something like that and it's been continuous, I would just, that is subject to all of those checks being done.
Absolutely.
And I also think it's quite common. I find horses are left and right-handed, so it's just work.
Yeah, and you raise a good point, because of course a lot of these race horses, a lot of them have raced with a preference with one direction. Richard, this one's for you, and really apt as well, because this lady is a sheep farmer in deepest North Cornwall. So anyway, it's not about sheep. She would like to know, she's got a former racehorse on loan, doesn't have access to an arena, and would like some gymnastic exercises that she can do whilst out hacking on a very sprightly 21-year-old with low mileage. So again, very much like yourself, Mr. Davison.
Yeah, except I hardly go hacking now because I treated myself to a nice hacking track here. So I suppose I do, but not out on the roads. But yes, great, good stuff. I mean, obviously all transitions, walk, halt, and you know, if you understand how you can refine those, and you know, years ago somebody said, oh, you know, you mustn't use your arm to me, and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to stop this horse if I don't do that. And they said, you should just use your finger, and I didn't understand it then, but obviously you can refine it, so you can really enjoy feeling, if I wriggle the ring finger of my left hand, does the horse go into stop? Okay, fine. Now what if I do it with the right hand? Which horses have different sensory systems on different sides. I mean, obviously, but different, but separate, if you want to call it that. And so one will be working quicker than the other. So you can look at that as a goal. Obviously, different forms of leg yielding in walk, I'm talking about now. And they are really important, because mobility of the quarters, it doesn't matter what label you put on, it makes a difference. In other words, you use a pressure, the horse moves its, I like to say it's pelvis, not its hind legs, it's pelvis. If it moves its pelvis, its hind legs are attached to its pelvis. But more importantly, as I said earlier, so through the sacroiliac ligament, which is its spine. And you therefore can start mobilizing the spine presses, the spine, the vertebrae behind you, rather than I talked about earlier about the neck. So you can start doing that sort of stuff, or you can use mobility of the forehand and stuff. So lots of things you can do. Before you cut me off, Kathleen, side saddle rider. Now there you go. She can tell you that she only has one leg. Perfect example. I don't know what a BD electric classes side saddle. Are you sure you spelled that right? But anyway, you know, side saddle riders and paras that have no legs are really interesting to me, and they prove my point that, you know, the answer to everything isn't stick your legs on the horse. It absolutely isn't. So anyway, brilliant point, and particularly with the para as well. That's absolutely a really great, fantastic flying changes, and they don't have any legs. Yeah. I mean, I say to him now, tell me how that works. Well, it's because it's in the triggers the brain to go through its legs, you know, so that is a really good point. Cara, do you want to add another point?
Yes, I want to ask Richard if he had anything, because I'm learning. Richard, did you have anything to add to my answer about the right lead canter?
Yes, I do, absolutely.
I knew it.
No, I thought you did a very good job, but I'll give you this, what I found. First of all, my top tip: do not go slow in the trot. Go into a fast trot. Don't be thinking, I must collect my horse. Forget all that. Let's just think about what is a horse. canter is a faster pace used for flight than trotting. Trotting is faster than walking. So if the horse's legs are moving in fast trot, it will be thinking, hang on, there's a much easier, more economical gait that I should use. We humans call it a canter. It's just a different leg arrangement. So once you see from a fast trot, and if you're on the lunge or even riding it, some not so well seated riders don't like fast trot because they can't ride, they can't balance on it. That's beside the point. I'm parking that one. But when a horse is in such a fast trot, on a say, oval shape or a big circle, you'll see it thinking, oh, why don't I, and it half canters, and you can see it just developing that. And that moment that it's half doing it, it may even half do it with the wrong canter. That's the time to then keep the inside rein a little bit higher. Do not give a leg aid, that will not work. Do not, if you can't get the right canter, do not take your left leg back. I've told you, it's completely meaningless, and it's like poking the horse in the stifle. It means nothing. I know it should mean something, and it might mean something. You can make it mean something, but it's not going to get it to do this right canter. So when it's half cantering, that's your moment that you want to keep that half. It's the mental processing starting to work, and that's your moment you can influence it. And you've got to be a bit clever, and it's not easy. It's a difficult problem to solve, but generally, if you keep your inside, your right hand a bit higher, that's the pressure, Cara, you were talking about. And well, it tries to go on the left canter, you don't release it, and then it'll be like, you'll just keep doing it, and it'll keep thinking, okay, I've got to find a different way to get out of this. And by randomly, it will try at a random the right canter, and then you can soften that rein. But you need to be in that phase of it experimenting, and it to be a natural thing for the horse to do. The easiest way of helping horses discover a flying change, a canter transition, of anything, is to put it in the situation that it would naturally choose to do that as a way out, as an escape. We're talking about escape of pressure. But you've got to get its brain on that edge of doing that, and that's the skill. So really, easy, but it's really, you know, it'll be much more likely to happen then from that, if you've got enough room and the going is safe and everything else Cara said.
Brilliant points. And somebody actually has put very refreshing discussion, and I think that's been the theme throughout this. You sort of take out the lingo, I suppose, really is what I think you do very well, both of you actually, and sort of give us a practical, real world kind of get it down to, as you say, take it down to the pressure release. One thing I am going to recommend actually, because Richard, you did an interview, I think it was in fact it was in Horse and Hound, it was last September. And I think that actually to round this whole discussion up, I really would recommend that people go back. I think there's a screenshot to this actually on your business Instagram account. It was an interview that Richard did with Horse and Hound, and there are two bits I just want to read to summarize this whole session, and I will give Richard a quick chance to come back if he wants to. He made a few points. He said, "We judge the horses on the things they have been working on, whether or not they win. I don't remember the prizes I've won. I remember the day, the day and the work and the time that he did his one-time changes smoothly, for example." And he went on and did another line, and which you gave, Richard, and it said, "Rather than the results, I take a measure of where they are in their training as a mark of success." Now, I think that is brilliant, because that really sort of, I think, sums up a lot of what we've been saying here. Sometimes it's about the little wins and how far that individual has moved in the training, rather than the winning a Grand Prix or whatever.
Yeah, I think you know, you'll just be disappointed if you just make the winning the prizes. And I know lots of people on this call will not be that type of person, but you know, some of my professional colleagues are. It's all about, you know, winning, or when they stop competing, they'll stop riding. I mean, I'm just lucky. When I just think when I started with my pony, I didn't know anything about the Olympics or anything else, and you know, I just like teaching it things, and it was never doing what I wanted to do. And you know, I couldn't catch it for one thing in the field, so I had to work out how to catch it. And so the satisfaction for me is getting the animal to do things, and that's what, you know, that's what I say. I'm an animal trainer. I'm not a dressage rider. I'm an animal trainer. I'm a neuromuscular practitioner, whatever that means, but it's going brain into muscles. That's what I am, and that's what it's not complicated. It's difficult to do it. I can't do it well enough, but that's what I am. I'm not a, so, I mean, get rid of the lingo. It doesn't help.
Yeah. Well, I think if anybody can find that into, as I say, it's in one of the September issues of Horse and Hound, and it was really good. And I do think it applies to training ex-racehorses, because at the end of the day, you might come last in a competition, but actually, if you manage to get a 7 for a free walk on a long rein, when a few weeks ago it was bolting as soon as you let go of the reins, it's a win, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's fantastic, and it's really satisfying when that happens.
Brilliant. Well, Richard Davison, Cara Hayward, you've been absolutely brilliant. We've gone way over, but I don't think anybody cares really, because it's been absolutely brilliant. We've had people from all over the country, as Richard has got extremely excited about. We've covered everything from...
I haven't managed to see you and wave at you all, but I'm going to do these things. I don't think we should have any questions. We should just do hellos.
Shout outs.
Yes.
Well, I think I need a mute button now, because I'm afraid we're going to cut you two off. But Cara Hayward, Richard Davison, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your expert insight, your opinions, your thoughts. We could definitely go on, and I think we're going to have to do another webinar similar to this, because both of you, honestly, have really given some great insights. So thank you very much on behalf of everybody at RoR.
Thank you very much.
Well done, Cara. And
thank you.
And I won't use the word lazy again.
No. Okay, good.
The RoR Dressage series is aimed at anybody with a former racehorse, whether amateur or professional, and qualification for the series can be obtained at both affiliated and unaffiliated level. The RoR Dressage series gives you plenty to aim at as well, and for those wanting to aim high, there's the Elite Dressage Performance Award, as well as Novice, Elementary and Medium Horse Awards. The 3 RoR Championships are another highlight, and of course the association with British Dressage. Well, don't forget to join me again next Wednesday for another session at 7 o'clock, and it's all things jumping with a bit of eventing thrown in as well. I'm joined by event rider Dan Bizzaro and equestrian legend, I think fair to say, another horseman. There's going to be bringing lots of insight, no doubt. It's Yogi Breisner. So that's next Wednesday at 7 o'clock.